mission on the move, we can never fall. Clap your hands, clap your hands, clap your hands, y'all. We on the mission on the move, we can never fall. We don't need your 2 cents, we live in the music. Play that record, play.
Well, thank you. One of the first things I have to say is I'm one of the architects. I wouldn't, ever take complete, credit for something that big. But I think, very much it takes a lot of people. It takes a village. I mean, nobody, you always hear the old adage, no person does anything by themselves. That's just true. I mean, a lot of times you see people and you see them and it's like, it's that person. And everybody, globs on all the praise and all of that on that one person. It's never that one person. I don't care who it is, and I know that firsthand because, you talk about so many different aspects of, my life, whether Prince or Morris or whoever else I was involved with, I know, that they would have never survived. They would have never, things wouldn't have happened for them if it wasn't for one thing, for the Black community that we grew up in. Because the community really, a lot of people don't understand you because, again, people think of Minneapolis and they think of Prince and they think of, he's, rock star, whatever. But the bottom line is it was all about community because community is what got us our start. A lot of people don't know, and I'll bring you guys a little up to speed about me individually. A lot of people don't know that much about my history. They just know, I was a musician, played with Prince and whatever, and that whole stuff. But, when I grew up, I was a knucklehead, period. Really, I would have to give, my mom a lot of credit, but I also have to give Prince credit in terms of, kind of keeping me a little more focused than I was, because, I came from the projects and, I think, one of the other things is, I think when you grow up, I was the youngest of 6, and, my brothers were into some stuff, straight up gangster stuff, it just was not, a lot of people think, a lot of people have no idea. They just think, when they think about me, they think about Prince, they think of Prince, they think of whatever it is that they think about. But the reality is, we grew up rough, and it just continues. My way out, I guess, was music, but the reality was, for me, I really did music, not for money, not for girls or none of that kind of stuff. I did music because I actually like to create sounds and, kind of got me motivated. You know what I mean? It's like I would create music to wake up, and get me in the right state of mind. And I was always like that. And it was, in the beginning, it was just cassette to cassette because I didn't have no money. So it wasn't like I had a 4-track or whatever, or some kind of recording machine. I just had a cassette. And luckily I had a cousin that was a drummer. So I'd, play a little drum beat and put some stuff on that, bounce it to a cassette, play that cassette, and then record it and go back and forth. And that was my multi-track recording system back then. But, my thing really, that's kind of how I grew up, and thanks a lot to the community, my mother, and really, going down a lot of crazy roads, because obviously, life can come at you in a lot of different kind of ways, and a lot of times, you don't know, a lot of again, life is always about choices, and I think that it's interesting to understand. I guess the thing that I came out of it understanding is I had to understand what the system was, because the system was always messing with brothers. For my brother, I learned all that from, one of my brothers went to jail, was in prison for a nice little number of years. My other brother went to jail on a regular basis. He was always in and out and had, major scuffles with police, but eventually wound up turning around, and, wound up, being, a private investigator, and eventually, had to, deal with how to bring the community, because he was trying to, make people understand that Black community don't trust police. It's no different than where it is now, which is crazy. But he was like, look, y'all don't understand how the community looks at y'all. And I think, I mean, from my perspective, all you need to know is the biggest community center we had, where, bands like me and Prince and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and whoever else you want to name, the community center that a lot of us came from was the Way, right? I mean, you may not know what the Way is, but the Way was a big deal back then. It was a big deal. It's like, for young brothers, it was like, like myself, because I mean, this is before, I was always into some stuff, and, crazy stuff, but the Way was a way to go somewhere where you had somewhere where, you could actually be off the street, and they give you something, whether it's bumper pool or whatever it was, which is what we used to get into, but it was important to have that. But, they tore it down. And what do you think they built in this place? Police station. So that tells you all you need to know about what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with. And you got to understand that, I mean, and sometimes I hesitate to get into the reality of what it is, but I think in order to really understand where we're at, where we're trying to get to, with the circumstances, you got to understand what the history is, and once you get into the history of the evolutionary process or how brothers get to where they're trying to go, you got to understand what the system is all about. And I think that's really, really important. And for me, it took me a minute to understand that. And through my family, through community, through a lot of folks that, took the time to reach out. And, and to actually, for me, it put my pride aside, because there's a lot of that going on. Sometimes pride can get in the way and can mess up all kind of stuff. And, the hardest thing sometimes, for a brother is to just let go of pride and do the right thing, not the thing based on, how you're gonna look or how somebody's gonna perceive you. Because, one of the other things that people, there was a point after all the success I had writing Tina Turner, different people I wrote for and hit records and Grammy Awards and all that, I was homeless for a minute. A lot of people don't know that, and because of pride, I didn't say nothing because I didn't want my family to know. It's like, I'm Andre Cymone, I just didn't want to deal with the stuff I was having to try to deal with. So I just had to just go, what, I gotta make this move on my own, and it was rough. And then finally I got past it, cause it's like, it was after my mother passed away, and it was a little rough for a minute, but again, I had to put my pride aside, and I had to, get my head back in the game, and I was able to sort of, make it work out. And, I had a lot of people that really cared about me, and I reached out to them and, turned things around and managed to, bring things back into perspective. So, but I'd really like to hear, where y'all's coming from, and kind of bring you into this. Cause I just wanted to give you a little bit of understanding of a little bit of my background, a lot more than that, but I guess that's the short version.
Wow, thank you. Who'd like to kick us off here?
Well, autobiography.
So, who was your inspiration?
Oof. I'd have to say that's interesting. I had a lot of inspiring people, as far as that was concerned. I mean, I would, to tell you the truth, I would have to say the community was probably my inspiration. I mean, I really liked Martin Luther King. I have to say, I really liked Martin Luther King. I got into politics, I was kind of young. And I think one of the things that inspired me when I was a kid is, it's gonna sound a little crazy, but, because my parents were gone and I was like on my own, right? My other siblings were grown. And so I got a chance to spend a lot of time by myself. And I found, in my neighborhood, there was always houses that were sort of abandoned, So, I would go and hang out with them sometimes, and just chill, But one of the houses that I went and hung out in had these magazines, like it had a collection of these Time Life magazines. And it was really interesting, you know? And, you know, I mean, because it was like it was a collection, somebody just left them or something. And so I just found them and I was like going through them. And in reading them, I read about like the lives of like Floyd Patterson, who was a boxer, and his hope. But, I found these magazines, and Floyd Patterson, it had a whole, an article about his life and his struggles to get from, he was a boxer and wound up, you know, going through a lot of crazy stuff and getting to where he had to be. But all that stuff was inspiring to me because I was like maybe 9 or 10 or something like that. And, you know, but in all of those magazines, there were like, you know, there were stories about riots and, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff in these magazines. And it inspired me and made me want to become, you know, one of those kind of people that reach for that, you know. So I started telling, you know, anybody that would listen, you know, yeah, I'm gonna be, you know, whatever. And I was talking all this stuff about what I was gonna be. And, you know, obviously when you're growing up in project, you don't nobody believe it. It's, yeah, right. You know, but you know, everything, you know, that I, you know, set out to do, I did. You know, I literally said, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And every single thing that I set out to do, I focused on it, you know. And one thing that my dad said is, he said, it's not how much you do, it's how much you get done, you know. And I always remember that. I was, you know, so, I mean, I read a lot of music. And every time I start something, I think about that. And I think, you know, when it gets a little rough, I'm like, it ain't done yet. You know, it's like you gotta finish whatever, whether it's the, you know, the guitar parts or the piano parts or, you know, the string parts or the lyrics or whatever. But unless I can play it to somebody, you know,
Right.
it ain't, you can't, you know, unless you can push play and say, check this out, and, you know, and be comfortable with it, you know. So anyway, thank you for that.
All right, so my question is, so I don't know, a lot of people have this like sort of misinterpretation of, I'm in the streets,
Mm-hmm.
or I was born in the streets, so I have to do street stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do to keep yourself away from that stuff? Because I know you said that your other brothers and stuff was into that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. So what did you do to?
Well, my brothers, for one thing,
Right.
one of my brothers said, well, I had two older brothers, and one of them said, you know, if you're gonna do this stuff, don't ever get caught, because if you get caught, I'm kicking your butt.
Right.
My other brothers just said, I'm kicking your butt if you do it.
Right.
So, I mean, there was that. But, you know, also, you know, I mean, you know, I did get into some stuff. So, you know, I mean, it's like, but I guess I always tried to, you know, calculate the risk and all that kind of stuff. But, and I got caught, I mean, so it's like, but I think the main thing that I tried to do to try to stay out of, that is to try to be focused on something. I mean, that was really my main thing, is that, every time I felt myself, going in that direction, I thought I need to refocus, and I always had to find something to focus on, and sometimes that's hard, but, I mean, cause again, like I have a son, I have 3 sons, but, one of my sons is, I'm always telling him the same thing, cause, he finds himself in certain situations, and I always tell him, look, you gotta focus, man. You gotta find that sort of, whatever it is, whether it's music, cause he does music too. He's an amazing artist. He does a lot of different stuff,
Right.
but you gotta focus on it. You gotta look at that one thing, and say, I'm not gonna stop until I get that one thing. And that's for me what did it for me, I mean, it worked every time. I mean, it sounds super simple, like almost like that's impossible. No, trust me, every single thing, I said, I want to do this, and I focused on it, and I did, and it's like, then I picked something new, focused on that, and I did it, and it's like, and then once you start to understand it, look, if I focus on something, it's going to happen. And you got to believe it's going to happen. You can't be discouraged. You just got to, because things, it don't happen right away. Like right now, I'm trying to do some other stuff and step outside of music. And I want to get into, what my brother OB was talking about, some politics, things like that, And so, I mean, as old as I am, I still feel young, and I still feel there's a lot of things I want to do. But to answer your question, just you got to focus on what it is that you want, go after it, stay, and that will keep you, from allowing. Because it is, people think that if you're from the streets, you gotta be in the streets. No, you don't have to do anything but what you want to do.
Right.
You can't allow other people, and I think unfortunately that's the game that they put you in, is that they make you think you gotta fall into this category. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of stuff that they put in our path to take us off our focus. Whether it's like, again, when I talked about the community center that they tore down, put the police station up, they also put a bunch of liquor stores up. And then they had like, all of a sudden there was all these drugs. After the police station got put up, there was all these drugs. And my mom would always say, I don't know no brothers that got no airplanes and no helicopters. And where's all these drugs coming from? Right? And then same with guns. It's like, I don't know no brothers can afford, brothers can't even afford to get jobs and all that. Where's all these guns? So you start to understand that there's a game being played. Mm-hmm. So again, you got to stay focused, because the street, because there's people trying to find you, trying to give you this other avenue, because it's a business. Mm-hmm. It's, I hate to get into a lot of that, because that really makes me upset. That really makes me upset, because that's the reason why I really want to get into politics. That's the reason why I make the music that I make, and I talk about some of the things that I talk about. Because I got into a whole bunch of crazy stuff because Snoop posted something about the state of music and how, he said 1 + 1 ain't adding up to 2. And, he said it in his own vernacular, the way he and people, how can he post something when he said this and Snoop says whatever he wants the way he said it, Right. But what he was talking about was the point. And it's like, people don't understand that basically the tech industry just sort of slapped the music industry and took the music industry away from them, and then put it on their platform and said, hey, people, you get free music, right? Wrong. Music ain't free. AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, whatever, you pay your phone bill, somebody's getting broke off. And so, I posted that, and a lot of people, because it's not politically correct or whatever. But again, I don't.
But that's the box you're not trying to fall in.
That's the what?
The box that you're not trying to fall in.
Yeah, that's the box. Yeah, exactly.
Not too long before I got here, I was watching one of your videos, What Are You Doing? Mm-hmm. And the curiosity that came to me was, in that time where it was you and Prince and Maurice Day in the time, y'all had I don't know what genre to call it. If that was the Minneapolis Sound or Minnesota Sound at that time, but what brought that electric, that electric sound into y'all style? Who was the first to do it? Where did it come from?
Well, that's a good question. The interesting thing is, again, when you live in Minneapolis, it ain't like Chicago.
Right.
It ain't like St. Louis. It ain't like New York. It ain't like LA. It's the Midwest. So you're in the middle of the country. So you get, if you get any black music, it's getting filtered down. You know what I mean? So I'm talking about radio, because back then, platforms are your outlet to the world. So radio was a platform. Luckily, we had, KMOJ at the time, which basically reached about 8 blocks in the neighborhood. But they would play some jams back then, but that was our only outlet. So we wound up being influenced by a lot of, rock and stuff like that, especially, myself and Prince and just where I grew up, and the nature of my brothers being the youngest, my brothers and sisters, they all had different musical tastes. So all of that went into me, because I was a musician. It's hard to explain the kind of musician that I am, because a lot of people don't know, because I don't really talk, talking a lot now, but normally I don't talk a lot. I don't do a whole lot of interviews and stuff like that. I stopped doing interviews for a number of years, like from 85 to, 2014 or something like that. I just, didn't get into it. But I just think, so people don't really understand. I really like a lot of that kind of music, different kinds of music, mostly because of my siblings and being exposed to different things. And my dad was a musician, and he didn't want me to play music, but he was a musician. So I had all those influences. And so when me and Prince got together, I think it was interesting because I brought my sister in, who's a keyboard player. And all the bands back then, most of them had, we didn't have shit. We didn't have money. They had money. It seemed like, I don't know where they got it from, maybe their parents, but we was broke. So we didn't have no money. They had horn sections and buses and all kind of other stuff. We didn't have nothing. We had like our moms, if they would drive us to the gig, maybe, but we didn't have. So if we wanted to do interpretations of certain songs, we had to do it with my sister playing keyboard. So that's kind of how that started, because we'd say, listen, just play the horn parts on your keyboard, on your organ. So rather than, it would be, and then that evolved into, once we got a little bit of scratch, we got an actual keyboard that has some different kind of sounds, because you're talking about like the 70s, right? Going way back. So that just kind of turned into a thing.
From your sister playing the tunes on the keyboard, it evolved into something organic for y'all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was definitely literally organic, and it turned into a thing. And, that became our thing. And, and I always tell people, because, people always have to do this sort of comparative, is this person better than that person? Is that person better than, is the time better than Prince, or is Prince better than, whatever? And it was going on back then, and my thing is that, I never looked at us as being better. I just looked at us as being different, because I thought they were, we went to see Sonny Thompson, who's one of this dude we went to see him last night, and this brother, he plays bass. And as much as I think, I used to be extremely cocky when I still play bass, but, I was like, in my mind, wasn't nobody bad like me. Couldn't nobody touch me, and I'd say, you can't play like me, okay? And I was like, I would tell people like my band, I was like, y'all can't touch my band. Y'all can't touch us. You think you can? Let us play. They said, because we was all little and young, I think we started like 13, 14. So I saw it all, talking all this stuff. Finally get people to let us come up and play. And we put, they're like, that was a mistake. Then we get that gig. But that's how we used to get gigs. Because, but Sonny, this brother, man, and last night he just ate the room alive. He makes me want to just put, if I had my bass at Bunkers, they play every Sunday, I guess. Because I don't live here, I don't always get to, So I just thought, we're here, let's go down there and, and check it out. So we did, and they were killing. Him in particular, and then we wound up sort of chopping it up afterwards, and because we spent a little time in doing a European thing, which was really cool, and he does a thing in Italy, which is cool. So it's but again, it comes back to really focusing on that one thing, because Sonny, he had a lot of people don't know, a lot of us growing up on the north side of Minneapolis, it was not easy, man. It was not easy, and his story is interesting. I just happen to know it. A lot of people don't. I'm gonna let him tell his own story, but a lot of brothers go through a lot of crazy stuff, just to get from point A to point B, because again, like I said, you got a lot of things working against you, and that's just a fact, so you got to go. You know what? I got to find that focus, and it's got to be your North Star. And you got to stay locked on it, because all this stuff will come at you, whether it's, family, friends, girls, relationships, kids, but you gotta always stick to that North Star, and I always say God is your conscience, let your conscience be your guide. That's it,
You mentioned the way several times, and I've heard, not being from the Twin Cities, I've heard so many people mention the way. The way was the community center, the model. There were some influential leaders back then. So who were some of the people that were leading and mentoring and just helping youth at the time?
Well, for us, and I say us because not as much me, but from what I'm hearing now, because it's always interesting. You hear more stuff after somebody passes away than you ever knew ever existed. But so I can't, I only know what my experience was. But for us, Spike Moss was he helped us in certain aspects and getting gigs and getting shows. Because back then, obviously, they weren't trying to let young Black kids, have outlets. It's a system that seems like it's, not really geared to help you get from point A to point B. It's like almost making it really difficult for you to get from point A. But in the community, if you, that's why I say, the community had a lot to do, because they offered us shows, gigs, and opportunity. And so we were able to, especially my mother. My mother was really obviously an integral part in all of it, because she was just, they have clips of my mom when she was starting, they were doing a new YWCA, and so they found some old clip of us playing, because she would just tell us we were doing gigs. She wasn't no asking, hey, listen, they opened a new Y, I need y'all to come and play. So we get our little raggedy equipment and go set it up and do a gig. So yeah,
that's incredible. That you bring up your mother. Bernadette Anderson is just an icon in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk about her. I want to hear.
Wow.
Talk about your mom.
Yeah, well, my mom, she again, it's kind of interesting because she was, one of 6 girls, and she had a rough situation, because back in those days they had, I think my grandparents got TB when they were all really young, and so the city took all of the kids, put them in foster care, split them all up, and quarantined my grandparents. So they had them all scattered around, and it was not a good situation. Somehow I believe my mother and her sister wound up on a farm somewhere, and it just sounds like it was an interesting situation. But she met my dad really young, and she got pregnant at 14, and had my oldest brother at 15. So. But, and then she was like, my dad was trying to do the best he could. He was, he came from a small town and, worked at the post office, but he was like, farm boy, basically. He was the only Black in the school. Actually, believe this, he was the only Black in the school, and he was a homecoming king in this little small town, way up somewhere. You see the yearbook, and it's like all these white folks, one Black man, my dad. So it's really interesting, But, married my mom, they had, started raising a family, but my mom was very strong Black woman. She was like, she wanted more for herself and for her family. So she kept, struggling and working and, working 2 jobs and doing that whole thing. And eventually, managed to, pull herself out of that circumstance and got an education, went to university, and got a degree. And managed to, get connected with, activism. She was like a hall monitor for a while at my grade school, which was interesting because my mom, working there was, because I was always, into some stuff. So then they could just say, I'm gonna go get your mom. Well, then my thing was, I'll go get it for you. So it was always, I was that kid, it's just, but yeah, she worked her way through all of that. And then, and basically, with, my brothers and going through all of that. And then my sisters, were, really integral parts as well. Because one of my oldest sister is a seamstress. And she's the one who made, all the, the Prince trench coats that you see and all the time suits and the Vanity 6 camisoles. And she made all of that stuff in the beginning, all of that. And my other sister was a model. And she had, photographers, and, one of her photographers that did her stuff was who she turned on, but Prince, who did all his early, album cover stuff. So, again, it takes a village, it takes a family, and you got to be willing to work with different folks and make all that happen. But my mom, again, coming back to her, because of all of that and her struggles, she was able to, get the community's sort of attention, and the Urban League's attention. And they shined a light on her and awarded her the Family of the Year award, I think in 1974. So they had a big dinner for her.
So my question was just, do you feel like your mom gave you the support that you were looking for when you were younger, trying to accomplish your dreams?
Honestly, not at first. And it's interesting because, I knew I wanted to be a musician. But, we were broke, and I get it. I understand it more now, that I've been through it, and as a parent, because I got 6 kids. So but not at first. It took a minute, because, I wanted, bass, because I wanted to be,
right.
My dad was a bass player, and I wanted to, I learned how to play bass on his upright bass, but upright is out of fashion, and I wanted like the new, yeah. So I was, Mama, come on, you got to get me this, and and she was like, and then she, had a boyfriend that was a bass player, and I tried to, and he was, that was kind of, that was, I wasn't digging it too much, so I don't know if I wanted it. maybe it had some visual. It's like, I don't know about that.
Right. It's like far away from it.
Yeah, I played it a couple of times, but I was like, seems like that could be a funny commitment that I don't want to make.
You don't want to make.
So yeah. But but it took a minute, and I found a bass once, and I wound up using that bass for a while until I had to give it back, to where I found it at. And then, but at that point, I think my mom understood how badly I wanted to play. Mm-hmm. She figured, well, if he's going to find a bass at this place, and then have to give it back, maybe I should, go down to Sears, rope up, invest in it. And she she managed to work some payment situation out. So I eventually got a bass, and then, that was.
So at first it was just, do you feel like it was just because she didn't know how serious you were?
I think so, yeah. I mean, because, a lot of times, people say they want to do stuff,
right.
Because anybody can start a war. Anybody can start a fight. Everybody can finish a fight, So, and that's, all that stuff is stuff my mom would say, it's like, and because, she didn't have the kind of money to just be thrown out. So I had to convince her.
She wanted to make sure that you were serious and make sure you actually.
Yeah, and I think at that point we had, our band was pretty much, was starting to pick up a little bit of attention.
Okay.
What age did you start music, and what lit the fire?
I think I was, I started music, when I was really little. I mean, because what I was starting to say before is, it's hard to explain my whole musical thing, but music is just in me. I know you hear people say music is in me, music is literally in me, and it's like, I would always hear music all the time. When I was probably the earliest song I remember writing was maybe 4 or 5, and I came up with this song, and I had the whole thing in my head, but I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know how, I was fascinated with stereos, like my dad had a stereo console, those kind of things that, those old school, it looks like I don't even know, like a cabinet or something, and you open it up and then there's like a record player. Yeah. He had one of those. And I just couldn't figure out how this thing worked. I mean, I would sit, when I was really little, and I try to figure out how this thing worked. I'm like, how is this working? It's like you play these brown things and they go around and music comes out. I'm like, I had to take it apart. I took that bad boy apart. Got my behind kicked, because it was, when I tried to put it back together, stuff wasn't fitting, and then screws was left. And then my dad came home, and then it was like, but but that really kind of made me really, because, I became fascinated with all those records, and I would listen to them and try to understand how they're making all of this stuff. It's like, what is that sound? I would try to get into the different sounds and I just became really obsessed with how all of this is working. So then I started watching TV and I'd be watching, trying to figure out, I didn't, you don't know how, you're a kid, you don't know how that stuff works, right? It's like, I'd be looking at TV trying to figure out how that connects, from what I saw playing to what I heard on the records, because I knew somehow they connected. And didn't nobody tell me nothing. Nobody, sat me down and said, hey, listen, Andre, this is how this works. It's a stereo, they go in a recording studio, and then nobody, they didn't know. It wasn't like they knew that, so I never got that. But that's really kind of what started it. And then my dad was a musician, so he had an upright bass, and so I would sneak because I wasn't allowed to touch it. But of course, I touched all over it. Oh. as soon as he was gone, I climb up on a little stool and. But when I said music is in me, I always hear stuff. And once I started to learn how to play instruments, I found out that you can make whatever you can hear, and that was the key. And so, I learned how to play guitar, and I learned how to play piano, learned how to play drums. I knew how to play drums early and all that other stuff and bass. And, so then it just became an easy thing for me, and then just, putting it all together. And like I was saying earlier, I was just doing cassette to cassette first. And then once I, one of my older brothers, got me a little 4-track, and then I, was able to do like a little more elaborate demo stuff.
So you being like talented and successful in the areas you hit, and like having your hands in so many stuff, was there ever a breaking point where you wanted to quit? If it was, what motivated you to keep going?
Man, that's a great question. And man, I had so many breaking points, so many times where I still have them sometimes. I ain't gonna lie, just full honesty, I still have them sometimes, because it's not easy. It's not easy. Because especially for somebody like me, it's one thing if you if you're just your own entity. You're just known for your own musical expression. I'm tied to Prince and tied to the Minneapolis music and tied to all this other stuff, and that's wonderful. But but at the same time, it's like, I guess it's a curse and a blessing, or a blessing and a curse, depending on how you want to look at it. But because it's like for when I first started off, a lot of people don't know how this whole Minneapolis music thing even chunked off. They just Prince, and that's wonderful. And it's great, and I don't ever want to say anything negative about anybody, really. But I just think that it would be great for people to understand the true way things happen, because it's not obviously what people think. Like I was talking earlier, it's like it takes everybody. No one man does anything by himself. And so there's a lot of stuff that we did that brought, we as in our band, that brought attention to our band. That brought people actually to want to see what all the excitement was about. But when I started doing solo stuff and producing and things like that, at first really it was just solo stuff. And people kept saying, well, you ain't like him. You ain't like Prince. Or you ain't like, The Time. You ain't like this. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be like, they got that, he's got that, and people would say the most foul things, and it was like, because you do interviews, and they would just say things that just, because you don't want to fight, because that's the first thing you want to do is you want to slap somebody upside the head. How could you say some crazy stuff like that? But they say it. I was you just would, some of the things people have said to me, and in meetings, in big meetings, big record companies, and they would say, the only reason why you're here is because of Prince. And I'd be like, what? And, knowing nothing about me, nothing about my history, and it just really, and people say, you act just like Prince, or you act just like this, or, it's like, and it was so insulting for me, because I prided myself on being an individual, and then back then I wouldn't say much, because I would get angry, and, I always had a bad temper, so I would just have to, my mom would always say, count to 10. So I count to 10 and calm down. And then I would try to, say something, less angry. But, it just, things like that would happen to a point that it just really got to a point where I was like, you know what, maybe I just need to step away from this, because it's like, I'm not, I would want to say, I have to remind people. I wouldn't do it back then, but since I started doing interviews again lightly, I would remind people, he came to live with me. I didn't go live with him. So it wasn't like I met him and said, oh, I want to go live with Prince. No, he met me and said, I want to go live with you. And came to live with our family for like 6 years or something like that. So, I think, I was always an individual. So for people to say things like that was really hard. And it really made me want to just step out of it for a while, which I did, and then I had to evaluate, because then I had, my daughter was born, and I had to really evaluate what was really important. And what was really important to me was family, and so and I know that when my daughter was born and my son was born, I was busy, because I was producing and, doing different things. And, thank God I had a lot of success. I just, because the record company was saying all that foul stuff, I just said, I'm not doing stuff with that anymore. So I just stepped away. It was crazy. It was something that, most people wouldn't do, because, you want a record deal. That's what everybody wants. I don't want it if it's not going to be right. So I just stepped away and thought, because I think the mistake people made with me is that they thought that, I couldn't make that kind of music. They didn't know that I'm part of creating that whole thing, So I just wanted to do something different, because, like I said, Prince was doing this, Time was doing that, there was all these different things. I just wanted to do something. So I created this whole different genre called New Wave, or kind of New Wave kind of thing. So, and that was like my own thing, So anyway, so stepped away from that, decided, let me produce. And I did, I think Evelyn Champagne King did her record, and that worked out pretty good. Then I did Jody's, and hers did really well.
Huge success. Talk about that for a minute, because, that's my time.
No, yeah.
But the music was, at the time that I remember when it was released, and didn't even know you or Andre Cymone the story, but her music took fire instantly. And so what was it about creating that music, that new sound? Because it was different, right? Yeah. And it grabbed you and stuck, and still today, when you listen to Jody Watley, it's like, wow, it still sounds very today too.
Yeah. Well, again, I just thought, what? It's all about reinvention. It's like, like I did with the stuff Prince and I came up with in my mom's basement, because we used to woodshed and write a lot of stuff. That was a vibe, and that's cool. But, Prince wound up getting all the it became synonymous with him, and then this other stuff that I was going to do for myself wound up coming out on the Time. So that wound up synonymous with them. So I thought, when I did my thing in my record company, they thought, you're signed to a black label, you should make black music, and they would play me Luther Vandross and stuff and say, why don't you do stuff like that? And I'm like, because I want to do stuff like this. And I remember getting into a thing, and I said, you're not putting a mustache on my Mona Lisa. And I stormed out, right? Oh, that was my big moment. And so I was done, So, but Jody's thing is, I thought, I wanted to create something, because she played me her demos and stuff that she had been working on. And it was really good. She did some stuff with some different people, but it was kind of, it was kind of rockish, and I thought, what, there's a void in pop R&B music for a female. and I'd done a female group, and so I, I saw a perfect spot. And so I wrote a bunch of songs, say 5 or 6 songs at the beginning, because, she was trying to get a record deal and going through her whole process. And so, so I played her some of her stuff, and she's a really amazing lyricist because she writes her own lyrics. And so she listened to them, and, she would always pick the most avant-garde, the weird stuff, like the most avant-garde stuff on the tapes, right? And I'd always have to go back and say, yeah, but what about that third song? Then she'd go back and listen to that and go, oh yeah. And then she'd come back and have all the lyrics done. So basically that's how I came up with that stuff, and we wound up working it out, and, and just trying to find something new for her.
How do you feel about having your name tied to this, and what responsibility do you have?
A couple of things. I feel honored to have my name tied to this, first and foremost, because I think programs like this need to exist right now. They need to exist always. But right now, it's really, really, really an imperative for people like myself, and really men in the community, to be involved in situations. Because, life ain't perfect. Life ain't perfect for nobody, And so if you can have an organization, where brothers, run into trouble, because we all get in trouble. My brothers got it. We all get into trouble, and I would love to, say, my dad was there, and but it was different because, we didn't always get along with our dad, So, but to have a place where you can come and you can sort of just, sort of reassess, regroup, I think that's really, I was just talking to this brother back in Los Angeles about just this kind of thing. And I didn't know that it existed. And so, I wish if something like this existed, because I don't need to tell y'all, but things happen and you wind up, nowhere to go, no money in your pocket, no food. And I can't say we've all been there. I know I've been there. That's why I can speak for myself. I've been there. And like I said, pride, pride will get you in trouble. But, but I just think that it's important to do that. And my commitment is, I already said it. Y'all need me, I'm here. Obviously I live in California, so that's, but this is the kind of thing that I want to be involved in. I love to be involved in, and I appreciate being invited, because I think, and the third, fourth, and fifth part of your question was...
That you answered the question. It was just, what responsibility do you feel you have as an elder in this community to us? But
there was another part that you said, I remember what it was. It was, I think the other thing is, I think it had to do with community, because I think, community is an important part of, really making, our culture whole. Because I think, the issue that happens is, I think you have a lot of younger mothers having children, and that becomes an issue, and they're too young to know how to, raise a man, they try to do the best they can. Sometimes they do good, sometimes they fail, and if they don't have a support system, then you don't have a support system, and then it just becomes a domino effect, and then they think, well, the police are going to raise my boy. And the police are not going to raise, you can't expect police to raise black folks, young black men. And, and I think the reality is, you can't expect society to present you with good black role models. Because if you step back and you think about it from a different perspective, it's really up to our own culture to put forward role models for black men, and for far too long, because you think about Hollywood and, what Hollywood has done, in my opinion, it's a travesty, because think about it, who finances these movies we see?
Right.
Who puts the money up for these movies you see that show black men, or young black kids, doing the different things that they do? Who actually pays for that to be on this. And why did they pay for that to be on the screen and maybe not that? Or pay for this to be on the screen and maybe that's something else? I think it's really important to look at it from that aspect, because all of that stuff, movies, music, who pays for this artist to be blown up? Because somebody got to market all of that. Somebody got to pay you. Basically, marketing, just so you know, it's about $1 million. It takes about $1 million to really market somebody, to get eyes on them and people to be, to step outside. Because I've had to do budgets for this kind of stuff. So I get it, and $1 million is $1 million. And unless everybody ain't got that kind of money sitting around. So you got to go somewhere to get somebody. And they say, well, what is it? And then they start deciding what they're going to put money into and what kind of message you're putting out. And, and therein lies the situation. And that becomes the conundrum, because you're putting out these messages that are saying, like I told my sister the other day, not to get too far off into a thing, but I said, take some lyrics from like 1970, 60. Just take, let's see, what's a good song? Was it
from the 60s?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Something Rita Franklin.
Okay.
James Brown.
Respect. Say it loud and black and proud. I mean, you can take all of those, and you can take those lyrics and then put those lyrics next to some lyrics that we got right now. Okay? Just compare those two. And that tells you all you need to know about where we're at right now. I mean, ain't no woman like the one I got. It's different. Different today.
Podcast.
What?
What they saying now?
Yeah, No, it really, I mean, I was riding around with my granddaughter yesterday, and the stuff she was playing, this is my granddaughter. I'm going,
I must have heard.
yeah.
Ooh, hold the chest, bro.
Yeah, well, that's my daughters that are older than her. I don't even want to get into the stuff they listen to.
How crazy is that though, to see the change? Like,
it is absolutely insane. And it really is, because the thing is, I mean, for somebody like me, I always find myself, I have to step back, because, you always get tempted to do your first reaction.
Sure.
That's always the wrong one. So I always have to step back, and I always have to go, okay, this is a fight. This is a thing where I have to approach it, because, I can't dictate, because as soon as you start dictating, yeah, exactly. So you have to step back and you have to start understanding the game. You have to put it in context, put it in perspective, and all of that, there's a perspective for all of that. And, and you can't slay that dragon in one fell swoop. It's like building a house or anything else. Right. You got to do brick by brick. And so I had to go back and understand, why is this? What is that? And all of that kind of stuff. And, because my thing now really is, this has got to change. It's got to change. And whatever I can do. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to be here and why this is so important. Why programs like this are why y'all are so important. Really, really. Because y'all are the future. Y'all can do much better than I can do it. It's wonderful I got a name, but the thing is, the reality is, music has changed. And I know that. I'm not, I'm one of those kind of people that I'm a realist. I don't spend a whole lot of time trying to live in some fantasy world and delusion. I'm very serious. I know where things are at. I get it. But all I can do is try to talk to folks and make them understand, you got to understand what the game is. You got to understand what the system is. You got to understand what politics is and how politics play into all of this. As young brothers, you got to understand it. You got to understand how you can change the system, because it's got to be changed. It has to. It's going to change. And it can either go one way or another way, because what a lot of people don't understand right now is it's imperative that we start dealing with this now. Because you're talking about AI and all that, and you wonder why things are the way things are, is that if you think about it, because a lot of people don't talk about this, and who's going to talk about it really? Because again, you only got a handful of platforms. You got Twitter, Facebook, whatever else little platforms there are right now. The news media is all controlled by corporations. So you only got a handful of platforms. So you're only going to be able to get your message out for change in a few different ways. And one of the things, we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go back to the old school way of change. And that's flyers and rallies. And you got to be careful with that too, because, you got crazy folks out there with, all these guns and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's the, because we're at a point now where it has to change. It has to change. And it's really up to y'all.
Because I know that you guys are going to take this to a whole new level. Mm-hmm. I put people in front of you that are going to transfer knowledge, but you guys are going to just take it and go to another level. That's going to change things. Mm-hmm. That's where the innovation happens, right? So really, really powerful conversation. I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just had a question about, because I love Prince's, y'all style, man. How did y'all come up with the style, like y'all clothes and stuff?
That's an interesting thing. A couple of things. I mean, I give credit to my sister because she made the trench coats, obviously, but the original trench coat was something that came from, I think a Ragstock was a store that used to be around.
Ragstock.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the original trench coat came there, and then, just had my sister make trench coats for the band. And that became just the front three, me, Prince, and
That's
Dennis.
so cool. Which sister was that?
Sylvia.
Wow.
Yeah. So she made those, and then that became sort of the iconic thing of Saturday Night Live and all different shows we did.
Right.
But for me, my thing was interesting. Probably shouldn't tell y'all this because y'all gonna laugh, and then I'll never be able to live it down. And so that'll be the way I go. Yeah, I thought, I want to do something a little different. So I thought, I was in, I think it was in LA, and I found these see-through pants.
Yep.
So I thought, let me try these bad boys on. I rocked them.
That's a see-through thing.
This how I feel like, because now I feel like the style and stuff is changing, but they don't know that style came from back then, so like from what y'all was doing.
Yeah.
So
I want to hear the CP. I want to hear the CP.
Yeah, no, it was well, it was because I just thought, let's do something a little different.
Right.
So I did that, and nobody was doing.
Nobody did it. Yeah.
Nobody was doing anything like that. And obviously the girls liked it. And the fellas, some of the fellas had problems because at that point I was like, I had gotten into martial arts, and I was like, really into, so I was like, I wish a brother would, say something about anything. So, but I was like, I'm rocking these. So I was rocking them, and if you're gonna do something, I always think if you're gonna do something, you gotta do it with conviction.
100%.
Yeah. So I was like, and so and then Prince, he came along, and then he eventually got into, because then it became, and that's really when I kind of stopped, because then he started wearing underwear, and then it was clear pants and underwear. It's like, okay, this is like Chip and Dale. So it's like, so then I started rocking ripped up jeans, because nobody was doing that. So I just kind of got into that thing, and then that became a thing.
You started the ripped up jeans?
I don't know if I can't say I started ripped up jeans. I just started wearing ripped up jeans because I had some jeans that got torn, and then I just thought, oh, this is kind of a punk thing, and then I had these. So I ripped up my shoes, and then
What about like bell bottoms? Did y'all wear those?
No. Well, I did before that. Yeah, because before that, Super Bells was the thing. Super Bells was the thing, and elephant pants was like the thing. So I rocked all that, but that was before. Before that whole thing jumped off. That's exactly what my mom said.
Too much information. That was really good. For me personally, you have such a unique style. You're a fashion icon to me because every time I see you, it's authentically you.
Thank you.
And when I hear you talk, it's authentically you. And so, I'm excited to be a part of this, and we'll do more telling that story